they both kind of limped into the final, right? Yep. I mean, the U.S. men's national team probably should have been down 0-2 the first half. And Mexico, for long stretches of that game versus Canada, were outmatched, outpaced, and outclassed, honestly.
We'll pull the curtain back here. Like, we were already in Las Vegas Thursday night for these games. There was definitely moments in each of those matches where you're like, oh, we're going to have a Canada-Qatar final, which would have been great for those respective countries, but obviously not why we're here on Futbol Americas. We came for United States and Mexico. All right, let's get into the matchup itself. Who has the edge? We'll get into some key categories, but we'll start with, I think, what's an obvious one. Who has the edge in terms of talent, Herculez Gomez?
This is easy. It's got to be Mexico. Look at the top-tier players they have. Héctor Herrera plays for Atletico Madrid. You've got players like Attilio Corona, who was voted the best player in the Portuguese league not too long ago. You've got players.
Talent is a dangerous word, my man. Talent doesn't equal results. Cuidado.
But talent's a good barometer to where these players are in their career, where they are in experience. And you look at the other side, I mentioned how little experience they have. This is, I don't even want to say arguably a C team. It is a C team. You look at the CONCACAF Nations League final, 3 of the players on this roster were on that roster. Only one really factored in a major way, which was Kellen Acosta, who started. So if you go on terms of what you see in talent level, I think Mexico overwhelmingly takes this.
All right, overwhelmingly, but then I think I would ask you, is that talent performing well? Because there's definitely some guys that I can see on the Mexican team, just picking out of air, Carlos Salcedo, Tecatito, who are extremely talented, great European resumes, both of them, but right now are not playing to that level. And so to me, that's a pretty serious
And if
concern.
you want to say Tecatito Corona, I could say that's a fair criticism because he's been MIA the whole tournament. MIA for a player who many are, touting for Tottenham Hotspurs, who are saying this guy is on their radar, who's been saying this guy should leave Portugal for the longest time. He's one of the most talented players in CONCACAF. Carlos Salcedo had a bad performance with what was Canada, but throughout the majority of this tournament, he's not been the issue.
I guess the question here is not who has more talent. It's really what is the gap between the two teams. Because when you say Mexico's A team and you say United States C team, it makes people think that there's like a huge gap. Is it a gap, the type of gap which, unless there's an accident of football in this game, the U.S. doesn't really have a chance?
I would say so. I mean,
really?
Pressure.
So if they play 10 times, the U.S. maybe can win once.
I would say yes. Yes, I would go that far to say yes. If you look at the pressure, and pressure could be a funny thing for these professionals.
Right, but we're talking about talent, not pressure.
Well that's what guess what I'm getting at. These top-tier athletes for the Mexican national team are supposed to win this game, right? I think it's 19-20 if you count Kessler, who's not probably going to feature in tomorrow or this final. 20 of them are Major League Soccer players, versus players that have European pedigree, versus players that may play domestically in Liga MX, but have been there, done that with the national team, who have Gold Cup finals and Gold Cup Champions League or Champions medals in their pockets. So, yeah, pressure's a funny thing. Mexico's supposed to win, and maybe the U.S. men's national team could play with that pressure, play with what would probably be a very pro-Mexican home crowd, and use that against them.
All right, you mentioned Mexican pro-home crowd. Location, location, location. It is what matters. As far as that, I mean, is it a home field advantage for Mexico? We just assume that that's an automatic here in Las Vegas?
I would assume that's an automatic in most parts in the continental United States.
Go back to the Nations League final. You remember there were moments there where the U.S. fans overtook the Mexican fans in that stadium. You could hear chants of USA,
well, that's the only
especially
reason
when the
you
U.S.
hear
was
those
playing
chants.
better.
Well, exactly. Why could you hear those chants? Because pressure's a funny thing, and you can take the crowd out of it. We saw it at Qatar versus
So when
the
you
US.
say, all right, so to that point, you say home field advantage. Who's not to say that the crowd doesn't actually play against Mexico here?
Well,
between pressure and between what they're dealing with the chant and how that could affect the game?
Let me tell you something about these young players. And the first time you play in a professional setting, a final, the pressure you feel when you hear your national anthem, when you hear the opponent's national anthem, when you take a look up for the first time, a deep breath, and you realize, I'm playing in front of how many thousands? Close to 70, maybe 80,000 people. It's going to be an immense type of pressure for the U.S. men's national team, but also a type of pressure that the Mexican players maybe are more accustomed to, right? Because everybody is, especially in the Mexican fan base,
this group of Mexican players.
They're expecting something to happen, right? Well, what's going to happen? How will they disappoint us? And when they don't, you're supposed to. So it's almost a lose-lose for the Mexican national team, because if you win, you're supposed to win. And if you lose, you lost to the U.S. men's national team C team.
Yeah, fair enough. I think it's obvious to say Mexico has a home field advantage. I think it won't be what it's been in the past. I definitely sense that there's like a buzz around this U.S. program that continues to change that. What about coaching? What about the technical area? Who has the edge when it comes to the two managers, Gregg Berhalter and Tata Martino?
This is going to surprise you. I'm going to say Gregg Berhalter.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I thought you were going to say Tata, so I was here ready to argue for Gregg.
You arguing for Gregg?
I'll tell you why.
Tell me why.
You go first. Well, Gregg Berhalter just beat Tata.
Yeah.
So I think he's got a little bit of there. I think if I'm looking at so I don't think Tata Martino is getting the most out of this group.
There you go.
I think you can definitely say that Gregg Berhalter is getting the most out of this group. So if I'm analyzing the manager's function, then I got to say Gregg Berhalter's doing more right now. Let's look at the results. I mean, they've beaten Canada, Jamaica, Qatar, all with more of their A teams than the U.S. And again, you're calling it a C team. I just think when you look at what he's got to work with, you have to give the edge to Berhalter based on this tournament. If we're going on CVs and all that stuff, Tata Martino's CV, you know.
You're not going to compare coach of Barcelona, Paraguay, and then Argentina, and then say, you know, Gregg Berhalter beats him out. We're not looking at the resume. But Tata Martino's shown me something I wouldn't even say just this tournament, since before the Nations League final, when they played against Honduras in that semifinal, where I'm thinking to myself, Costa Rica in that semifinal, where I'm thinking to myself, wow, the pressure's getting to him. He's starting to crumble. And then you see what he does in the final and how he manages his team or mismanages his team, and then he lets himself get red carded. So he's not there for us. It just seems like he's crumbling under pressure. And for the first time, maybe it's the press, maybe it's the environment, maybe it's everything that goes around what is the Mexican national team, but he's starting to feel it, and he's starting himself to make mistakes.
It's cumulative. I think it's cumulative, that pressure, especially when you talk about the U.S.
And Gregg's been consistent, if anything, with everything.
Right, and talk about the U.S. beating them in Denver. What about pressure for the United States? Because, you know, to borrow a Vegas term, house money, it really very much feels like there's nothing to lose here for the U.S. And in a final that, I don't know, maybe I would think for a player that's like an empowering dynamic.
It is.
Because if you're saying there's a lot of pressure.
Unless you're on the bad end of a, you know, like a beating, 5-0, 6-0.
Yeah, but they won't know that going in.
No.
They won't know that going in. So these kids won't have the pressure of the expectation of winning
and maybe that plays to their advantage, how naive they can be going into this. But I saw those nerves against Qatar.
Right.
And that was in Austin with a pro-U.S. crowd. And you see the nerves. James Sands all of a sudden felt the nerves. Shaq Moore all of a sudden felt the nerves. Players in that midfield felt the nerves. The only person who probably wasn't nervous or didn't seem like it, but maybe there were two, was Matt Turner and Matthew Hoppe. Everybody else seemed like the moment had gotten to him just a bit, right? Well, that could play in your favor too. Now, if you're talking about, you know, the house money, that's a dangerous thing, because when you have nothing to lose, you're a dangerous opponent.
There's a key difference here. Is it some pressure or no pressure for the U.S.? Because I would still say you're at home, Gold Cup final, rival. Like, there's got to be some pressure here.
Yeah, I would say there's some pressure to perform, not to win.
Right.
I mean, I think the majority of U.S. men's national team fans and the majority of the pundits in this area understand, like, they got to the final and how they got to the final, who they're playing. Like, for this group, that's a win, right? You're playing against Mexico. Nobody expects you to beat Mexico. If you beat Mexico, you embarrass Mexico. That's a reality. A C team, you embarrass Mexico. And whether Mexican pundits wanted to agree a C team or not, let's call it a B team if you want. That's still embarrassing for Mexico, for this Mexican national team.
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN+.